It's easy to get distracted. The crowds around Galilee wanted to make Jesus their ruler, but he was not captivated by their numbers nor his popularity with them. His kingdom movement of multiplying disciples was different. It grew from God's heart of sacrificial love for others. It depends upon others. He had chosen 12 leaders to multiply disciple-making, but there were to be many more.
6 months before his crucifixion, Jesus came to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. He had spoken about church at Caesarea Philippi, talking about the foundation of his sacrifice, and now he spoke of the Holy Spirit. On the last and greatest day of the Feast of Tabernacles, the priest descended the steps to the pool of Siloam, and then ascending the 600 metres to the Temple Mount with a flask of water, the men chanting about springs of living water from the wells of salvation, swept around the temple altar. And as the priest prepared to pour out water and ceremonial wine in a conduit at the base of the altar, Jesus interrupted and cried out, "If anyone is thirsty, come to me and drink." And by this he was referring to the Holy Spirit, who those who believed in him would later receive. The temple authorities knew exactly what Jesus was saying. And by his teaching, his miracles, Jesus was demonstrating exactly who he was.
Now, with just months to go before his death and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, when the disciple-making movement would explode, Jesus multiplied movement leaders. He'd been equipping the 12 and the women who travelled with him. Now he chose another 72 leaders and gave them the same training that he'd given the 12. He outlined simple, easily reproducible principles of disciple-making. We find his training recorded in Luke 10, verses 1 to 24. He formed them into teams and highlighted the principle of incarnation. They were to enter people's homes and lives. He emphasised finding key people in relational streams, people who are welcoming and receptive, people with a reputation and influence when they become disciples. He outlined 3 steps by which to connect with people, steps that we can take as disciple makers. He said, eat their food, listen to their stories. This opens the door to healing them. Listening, praying for them, encouraging them, letting them know that you have found God is near now and he will walk with them.
This simple process opens opportunities to share more about what Jesus is like. Some will be open to reading more about him, perhaps exploring the Gospel of Mark with you using the Discovery Bible reading process. It is true, if you can eat, you can make disciples. Jesus had laid the foundations of his movement, expanded the base by equipping and releasing all disciples to participate in disciple-making, and multiplied movement leaders. He then headed for Jerusalem to make the supreme sacrifice for our salvation. On Palm Sunday, Jesus rode up from Bethany and Bethpage over the Mount of Olives. With the magnificent temple in Jerusalem before him, he was overcome with emotion. It was like he became oblivious to the crowds around him as he wept over the city and the fate it was choosing. The next days were busy with teaching and warnings. One evening, a meal was held in his honour in the home of Simon the leper in Bethany. That night, Judas Iscariot met the temple authorities and agreed to hand Jesus in.
Thursday night, Jesus shared the Passover meal with his disciples. He revealed that he was aware of the plan that one of them should betray him. He spoke of his death, his departure, the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, and his return. Events moved quickly. In Gethsemane late that night, alone, in prayer, the arrival of Judas with the temple guards. His betrayal, dragged up these steps to the judgment hall of Caiaphas, followed by 3 Jewish trials. Then to the Romans and 3 Roman trials. Finally, to the hill of Calvary. By 3 p.m. that Friday, Jesus cried out, "It is finished." And he was dead. The city was enveloped in darkness. The ground shook. The curtain separating the holy from the most holy place in the temple tore from top to bottom. Graves split open. Jesus was dead. All necessary for our salvation had been accomplished. He was laid in a new tomb in a garden and rested during the hours of the Sabbath. But that was not the end.
Early on the first day of the week, Jesus arose. He had defeated the power of the evil one, broken the power of the grave, and he was alive. He appeared to many people. He met his disciples here on a mountain in Galilee to commission them. "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me," he said. "Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, and in the name of the Holy Spirit, teaching them everything I've commanded you. And surely I will be with you always." 40 days after his resurrection, having promised the baptism of the Holy Spirit would come in just a few days, Jesus ascended from the Mount of Olives. He had prepared well, laid the foundations, expanded participation to all in disciple-making. He'd multiplied his leadership, and now it was time for him to leave his ministry to the Holy Spirit and his disciples who would multiply this movement.
He left them with a clear message. He was dead, but now is alive. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He left his disciples with a clear promise. The same Spirit that baptized him would baptize and empower them. He modelled, taught, and commissioned them for the task he now gave, to multiply disciple-making. His disciples stepped up to serve and continued the movement that Jesus started. In what ways are you prepared to invest in Jesus' kingdom movement today?